Hi. One of the big questions, especially in a post-Royal Commission world as we've got in Australia at this moment in time, is ethics and culture. How do we influence culture and improve the culture in not just the financial services world, but also in different industries? Now, having completed a master's in business leadership and implemented successful ethical and cultural change in organisation, I wanted to actually share with you some of my thoughts and feelings on how to successfully not just build the ethical framework, but implement ethical frameworks throughout organisations in order to influence the culture of the organisation. Now, one of the things that I really do understand is that there seems to be this gap between theory of understanding ethics, and I mean a deep theory of ethics, and implementation, or the practical implementation of an ethical framework in order to influence the culture of an organisation. Now, when I say about ethics and ethical frameworks and understanding ethics, I talk about the different theories of ethics, and we go really in depth into ethical theory, things like deontological theory, Kantian approach to ethics, the utilitarian approach to ethics, and really understanding an in-depth theory of ethics, so it starts to actually build and intertwine into the DNA of not just your employees, but everybody around you. So a few years ago, I actually created and built an ethical framework that is quite unique across the world. It actually intertwines Kantian ethical theory with utilitarian ethical theory. Now, the Kantian is Immanuel Kant, and it's your moral maxim to actually do the best that you possibly can. And what I mean by that there is, in Immanuel Kant, the Kantian approach is legally, it's your duty to do the right thing. Now, utilitarian approach is obviously to do the best, or the best for everybody. When you actually look at it, actually amalgamating the Kantian and a utilitarian approach to ethics, and you build that into a framework, it's your duty as a moral maxim under Immanuel Kant to do the best thing, or for the good of all. And there is the actual amalgamation of a Kantian and utilitarian approach that can be built into an ethical framework. The second part, and the most hardest part, is once you've built your ethical framework, is to implement that down into the organisation, starting from your leadership team, right the way through the organisation, so that everybody then starts to apply the Kantian or the moral maxim, and making sure that they apply the utilitarian approach. Again, as I said to you before, Immanuel Kant and utilitarian approach. So what you do then is you actually bring that training into the organisation and you apply that in your leadership team, as well as an overlay of emotional intelligence in making sure that you create the right environment so that the leadership team can understand the thoughts, feelings and emotions of their actions, and more importantly, the thoughts, feelings and emotions and identity of others, to make them better leaders in themselves. Now, we always talk about how do you implement ethics in order to improve the culture in organisations. One of the big things that you need to do is not just, besides having the ethical framework and the implementation structure, you need to understand where you're going to implement this. And there are a number of areas that you do need to actually look at and identify when you're implementing an ethical framework that is going to influence culture in an organisation. Firstly, for the existing people in your organisation, have you actually given them ethical training? Have you actually embedded this to a level where they've intertwined this with their own self-identity and their DNA? And that means comprehensive training in order for them to understand the different ethical theory and how to practically apply it. But more importantly, how to apply ethical dilemmas, like looking at Trevino and Nelson's ethical decision-making framework and using frameworks like that in an organisation to really improve the ethical decision-making of not just your leadership team, but everybody in the organisation. So that is part of the integration, the implementation of ethical frameworks in organisations. But also a missing factor is for people that you are employing. Do we have an ethical analysis of people at an interview stage? Do we actually understand them and actually look at them and analyse them from an ethical implementation framework point of view, and skill gap that analysis so that we can put ethical programs in place to bring them up to the stage where they can then transfer this knowledge to others in organisations? This improves the culture of an organisation by actually getting the frameworks and implementing the ethical frameworks in place. And as I've seen, we've got net promoter scores of 90% where we've seen the results of this. But you create an environment of trust as well by actually making the right decisions, as I said, because it's your duty to make those right decisions under Immanuel Kant for the good of all under a utilitarian approach. Hopefully that will help a lot of organisations look at their ethical frameworks and influence the culture of their frameworks. Thank you very much.